Good afternoon, everybody who's just joining the webinar. Nice to welcome you to what is the latest in our Kingswood Group series of webinars. My colleague Julie is just letting everybody into the room. We've got quite a long list of people joining us today, so she's going to be happily doing the admissions activity. I hope everyone's having a good week so far. We've made it to the penultimate day, which for those who only worked Friday like me is great. So whilst we're just waiting for people to join us, I just want to thank everybody for joining the webinar today and for signing up to what promises to be a really interesting and engaging webinar for us all. From burnout to balance, taming cortisol and conquering stress in the modern workplace. I'm going to leave my colleague Sue to introduce herself at the moment, but for those who haven't joined one of our Kingswood Group webinars before, my name is Gemma Todd. I'm the Head of HR Services and Projects for Kingswood Group, and I'll be talking a little bit later on today in the webinar about Kingswood Group and what we do. But for now, I think if Julie, you're happy for me to progress on, I will hand over to Sue to do her own introduction and start today's webinar. Sue.
Thanks, Gemma. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sue Porter. I am from Wellbeing Clinic, which I own and run, and we are doing this webinar in partnership with Kingswood Group. So, we'll make a start to understanding hormones, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the key UK statistics to put this into context. So in terms of the statistics around it, it's very high numbers, as you'll probably be aware. We all know somebody that has a work-related illness, particularly when that's made up of stress, depression or anxiety. So it's estimated that 1.8 million UK workers are suffering with work-related illness, and half of those, so 900,000, are made up of stress, depression or anxiety. The actual numbers are thought to be much larger than that. They're just the reported statistics that are documented. So the numbers are huge. So in terms of what that means for businesses, it means that more than 17 million working days are lost as a result of stress, anxiety and depression. And that was reported last year by the Health Safety Executive. 61% of employees have experienced mental health issues due to work. So, you know, more than 1 in 2 of us. So again, it's huge. Poor mental health costs employers up to £42 billion per year, which is a Deloitte study and statistic. 30% of managers say they don't have enough support available to enable employee wellbeing. So that's again quite scary, that many managers are saying that they're out of their depth with regards to supporting their own staff. And in terms of return on investment for improving wellbeing at work, there's different figures debated, but it's the lowest of those figures is £2.32 return for every pound, which is Public Health England. I have seen over the years up to £9 return on investment. It's very hard to quantify because a lot of things are multifactorial. But this key UK statistics just puts into context what we're going to talk about in the webinar today. So in terms of hormones and the body, we know that stress hormones, we've probably all heard of them, adrenaline and cortisol being the main ones, produced by the adrenal glands, which sit just above the kidneys. But you'll see here, I like this diagram because it shows how many hormones we've got in our body working at any one time. Some of them you'll be familiar with, some of them you won't have a clue what they are unless you're from a medical background. And they are really controlling, they're powerful hormones that are controlling the physiology of our body at any one time. So all of these have a knock-on effect on one another. And that's a really important take-home message for hormones, because they're not self-contained. They're working in the whole body system. they're mixing with each other, they're interacting with each other, and they cause knock-on effects because they are so powerful. So for instance, we know that if your adrenaline and cortisol increases, you get fight and flight responses. That takes the blood away from your stomach and delivers it to your hands and feet, where you need to use to run away, those kind of things. So when you do that, a lot of those stomach hormones that you'll see listed on the right hand side will come into play. So they all interrelate, and for this reason, hormones have a real exponential effect in the body. When one of them goes awry, whether it's because of menopause or because of stress or because of adolescence and hormone change, they have knock-on effects on every organ and system in the body. So we're going to look at the stress hormones, given the title of this webinar, from burnout to balance. So we're going to look at what those stress hormones do physiologically in the body. So you may have heard of the fight or flight response with regards to the effects of adrenaline and cortisol. So what happens here is that we get the release of hormones from the pituitary gland. The adrenal glands then release the adrenaline and the cortisol, which goes into the bloodstream, and that causes digestion to slow down, tunnel vision, accelerated heart rate, faster breathing, increased sweating, increased blood pressure, and the conversion of glucose to come out of glycogen stores within cells. So your body here, as you'll probably know, is gearing up to fight or flight. Unfortunately, the modern day stress response, we are not fighting or flighting, most of us, unless we're professional boxers or runners. We are sitting at our desks, feeling stressed. We're getting a response in this way, so this release of hormones. There's nothing to fight or flight from. So the stress hormones continue to go around, damaging tissues in the body. The cortisol levels remain elevated, which becomes a catch-22 situation. Stress occurs and we're in this perpetual cycle of stress. And most of us are chronically stressed in this country, which means we're never entering that stress cycle. Not even when we go on holiday for a week or 2 weeks, we're not entering or exiting, that stress cycle. So in terms of the secondary effects, which is the diagram on the right-hand side that this has, the brain has difficulty concentrating because it has a lack of blood supply, because it's all in the arms and legs ready to run away. The cardiovascular system is heightened, so our risk of heart attack and stroke is more prevalent. Our joints and muscles become inflamed, achy, tense from prolonged exertion or readiness to react. Our immune system becomes decreased because at that point, we're not necessarily concerned with fighting illness. We just want to get away from the danger. Our skin, we can lose hair because of stress. Our hair can become dull or brittle. Our nails can become dry and broken and brittle. You can get dry skin, acne, and delayed tissue repair, which is really important for healing. So if you're diabetic or something, it's very dangerous to have a reduced skin response. Your gut becomes affected and your stomach, so your ability to absorb nutrients from food becomes reduced. So your stomach acid reduces in pH, and it becomes much harder to absorb vital nutrients and minerals from food, which in turn affects stress response on the body and can make you feel more fatigued. It can also cause problems with diarrhea, constipation, indigestion, bloating, pain and discomfort. And from a reproductive system perspective, we get decreased hormone production, a decrease in libido, and an increase in PMS type symptoms in females. So you'll see how wide-ranging those effects of stress hormones are in the body, and why that can be damaging when you think about we're not allowing those chemicals within the body to discharge and release because we're not fighting or flighting. So they're just building up and continually activating different pathways and mechanisms in the body. So what does this mean? So from an HR perspective and an individual perspective, for line managers in the room, from a performance perspective at work, It means that people will reach a fatigue point, a point of exhaustion or burnout, when they can no longer improve their performance because of the pressure that they're under. Now, there is a lot of theory surrounding pressure and stress at work, but I'm going to put this simplistically because I could talk for hours about that. So what I'm going to say about pressure is pressure can be helpful for some individuals. Everybody has a different level of resilience in which they can cope with certain amounts of pressure. That's dictated genetically, but also from life experience. And then with regards to stress, stress is never helpful for anybody. So some people say, I like stress. What they mean is I like pressure. Stress is always detrimental to the body and mind. Stress stops the body from working because you get that release of adrenaline and cortisol. So your brain cannot work effectively. You are not going to deliver good quality of work. You will make mistakes. Your attendance will slip. Your sleep will become worse. Your state of health will deteriorate, and then you will be less able to do your job. So everybody has this unique fatigue point where pressure is no longer helpful to performance, and that's the top of that curve that you'll see there. It's really important for line managers to know their staff, to know where that tipping point is, because people like a certain degree of pressure to allow them to perform in their work. But once the people start to get fatigued, you need to know how much can that person cope with before it becomes detrimental to their health, but also for their performance. So once they reach that point, past the middle of the curve, where the curve gradient starts to decrease, they become exhausted, they become ill, their absence will go up, their presenteeism will go up. So when they're at work, but they're not actually performing or doing work. And at that point, even minimal pressure could produce a breakdown. So someone bursting into tears over something very insignificant because they're just overloaded and overwhelmed already. So we've probably all seen people like that or been there ourselves. And in its worst sense, it could actually lead to a medical breakdown at some point if this is sustained over a period of time. So it's really important to understand where your people are at on this curve. If you don't know, ask them. They'll have a good sense of where they are. But it's important for line managers and the role of the line manager to be able to conduct these kind of conversations to understand where their staff are at. And that will be inherently useful for the organisation as well. So we're going to now talk about a bit more of the science side of things. So where I said at the beginning that hormones are all interrelated, one of the ways that is we have what's called the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands. So that's obviously what the HPA stands for. Now, when you get a change to any one of those, whether it's sex hormones, whether it's stress hormones, whether it's growth hormones, whether it's changes to body temperature, whatever it may be, they have a knock-on effect on each other. So what this means is, as this webinar is looking at stress, we're going to think about the stress hormones. So when the stress hormones increase, our ability to maintain a steady blood glucose level becomes much harder because it upsets our release of insulin, because that is also another hormone that has a role. So where those hormones stopping then each other from working effectively because there's a flood of them within the bloodstream, you could eat exactly the same food and diet, but rather than have steady peaks and troughs, you could get gradual peaks and troughs. More pronounced peaks and troughs, like you'll see on the graph on the right-hand side, where the blood sugar is literally going on a roller coaster of ups and downs throughout the day. Really, it should just look like you have little peaks at meal times or snack times, and then it almost normalizes. So when you've got those dramatic peaks and troughs there, it's really unhelpful for the brain, which solely relies on glucose as its fuel. So your ability to think at work, but also it's very detrimental in terms of fat storage and weight gain, but also having those sugar slumps. It becomes, when your blood glucose at that lower level, you struggle to perform at work. So you're getting a lot of downtime in your day where you're not being effective. and it's also not good for your mental or physical health either. So this just shows how one simple change, like going through a stressful period of time, whether it's at home or work, can have a knock-on effect in terms of your blood glucose levels and in turn your performance at work. So it's just one example of the way that hormones affect everything. So with that in mind, we're going to look at the signs and symptoms of stress, anxiety, and depression. So one thing that I think is really important as a take-home message from this slide is that we all human beings, we will all experience depression if we were under sustained period of stress for a prolonged period of time. We all have a breaking point. We're all human. It's not, therefore, not in my mind a taboo, because it just is about what circumstances we're presented with in life and how we cope with them. But anybody and everybody can experience anxiety and depression. It doesn't mean that you've got some sort of genetic flaw or weakness. It just means that you're under a prolonged period of stress. So what does stress look like? It can look like anything, in all honesty, and that's why it's important to know your staff, know yourself, and know when you're different, know when you're more irritable or more aggressive or more impatient or more stressed out, more afraid, your mind is more overactive, you're lacking enjoyment in things, you might have digestive issues, you might lose your sense of humour, you could also feel a sense of dread, be indecisive, be upset, gain or lose weight, and you could also take part in negative coping strategies like, for instance, drinking alcohol. A lot of people experience muscle tension and headaches and migraines from stress too. So anxiety. Anxiety is the next level of when stress isn't managed. Anxiety will cause, in a lot of people, a churning stomach, a feel of a real sense of overwhelm and dread, tension, self-consciousness, pins and needles, restlessness, headaches, back pain, hyperventilation, high blood pressure, irrational worry, rumination, depersonalization, where you no longer feel attuned to who you are. You don't even recognize yourself as that person anymore, and you are consumed with overthinking. Then depression. So depression is just the next stage. A lot of people have experienced depression. It's an overwhelming sense of doom where you feel down, upset, restless, worthlessness, numb, empty, isolated, you lack pleasure, you lack enjoyment. In its extreme form, you can feel suicidal. And a lot of people self-harm or withdraw from social activities. And accompanied by that, you feel extreme fatigue, as well as changes to appetite in either direction. So have a think, have you experienced any of these signs and symptoms? Do you know yourself? Do you know your teams? Do you know the staff that you manage? How would you notice these changes in them? And would you know what to look for? And we could probably all answer honestly that we probably don't know. And we probably need to know our staff better to better enable us to be a better line manager, a better director, whatever our role is, better friend, better colleague. It's important for everybody to recognise these signs and symptoms. Ask, are you okay? Are you really okay? I've noticed that you don't seem yourself, you seem different. Can we talk? Do you want a cup of tea? Any of those will just allow people to open up a conversation, and an open and honest culture will become instilled in the organisation, which is so important, as Gemma will talk about, for employee engagement, well-being, and also if you're a profit-making business, that your profit margins. So moving on from that, what can you do? So a lot of these are you will have heard of. It's important to be hydrated. So 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, 2 to 2.5 litres, will keep you hydrated. Your brain will be hydrated. Even a 1% reduction in brain hydration can cause a 10% reduction in performance. Caffeine. So caffeine, a lot of people are in caffeine toxicity. Caffeine toxicity is when you go over 200 milligrams of caffeine a day. 200 milligrams of caffeine a day is one shop-bought shot of coffee. It's also 5 cups of tea, and it's also 2 cups of coffee that are made with granules. So it's not a lot of caffeine. Most of us in our society are in caffeine toxicity. Caffeine toxicity causes problems with concentration, blood glucose, ups and downs, like we saw on the previous slide. It causes difficulties to sleep. It can cause tremors, palpitations. It can cause all kinds of problems in different people. Some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others. You will know if you're sensitive to caffeine or not. But in all honesty, decaffeinated options, which still have caffeine in them, they have 1/3 as much caffeine, they are much more preferable. Or no caffeine, just drink non-diuretic drinks. Sitting for a prolonged period of time is not good for your mental or physical well-being. Your valves in your legs are dependent on you moving around in order to circulate the blood back to your heart. We also want oxygenated blood around our body, not deoxygenated, as I'm sure you know. So please do get up, walk around, get a sit-stand desk, stand up, sit down, move around, take breaks, all of that. In terms of nutrition, really important to consume a healthy, balanced diet, different sources of protein, different sources of fats. Make sure you get your omegas, your different fat source, your good fats, and not to rely solely on carbohydrates like a lot of us do. It's very easy to just consume carbohydrates in our society, but please do get plenty of protein and fat as well. There's a lot I could say about nutrition, but this is just obviously just an overview for the purposes of this webinar. In terms of your health, protect your broader health, go for your regular checkups, go for your smear tests, go for your mammograms, go for your prostate checks, know your numbers. Is your blood pressure high? Is your oxygen saturation okay? Do you have a urinary tract infection? What's going on in your body? Do you know your numbers? What's your cholesterol? If you don't know, get checked. It's something we can do, or we can, you can signpost yourself to your GP if you can and get checked. We should all know our numbers. And then last but not least, be physically active anywhere. It doesn't have to be the gym, it can be the garden, it can be at home, it can be in front of the TV. Just be active. 150 minutes of exercise a day is the recommended amount, which equates to 30 minutes a day. So it's not that much. In fact, I think it's less than that, about 20 minutes a day. So it's not a lot of exercise. We could all do it. So that's what you can do for your physical well-being. And that will help improve that management of that adrenaline and the cortisol. In terms of your mental well-being actions, there's a lot that you can do. So we talked about caffeine. It's helpful to reduce caffeine. Prioritize your sleep and try to adhere to your normal sleep-wake cycles at the same time every day. Practice mindfulness. So mindfulness is really important to allow the grey matter in our brains to develop. It improves problem-solving ability and cognition. And people that practice mindfulness are much more effective and efficient in their work. So you might feel like you don't want to take 20 minutes out to be mindful, but it will have long-term effects on your productivity and health if you do. It doesn't have to be yoga or meditation. It can be literally doing something you enjoy, whether it be cooking, whether it be cycling, swimming, sewing, whatever you like, painting, just something where you can be mindful in the moment, and your brain will be churning away in the background, allowing those compartmentalizations and improving cognition. Communication. We are social creatures. We can't change that. We have spent millions of years evolving into social creatures. No man is an island. Please do share how you feel with others. There's some interesting research about empathy and how if we're more open and honest with others about how we're feeling, they will in turn be more open and honest with us. And that creates much deeper, stronger relationships. And then last but not least, gratitude. There's a lot out there at the moment around gratitude. If you start the day thinking about 3 things that you are grateful for, you are much more likely to have a positive and productive day, because your mind is looking for positive things. So this comes into like neuro-linguistic programming territory, where you're looking for positives rather than negatives, because you're grateful and content with what you've got. So there's some real key things that you can focus on. If you do have trouble with sleep, there's some key tips that you can do. A bath or shower half an hour before bed drops core temperature, which induces sleep. You can try lavender, you can try a milky drink, try not drinking or eating too close to bedtime. And some people use meditation and relaxation techniques as well. So that's it for mental wellbeing actions. One last tool that I'm just going to share with you before I hand over to Gemma is the bucket theory for stress management that you might have come across. So draw yourself a bucket. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It can just be a square or a rectangle. Think about your daily stresses in your life, whether it's workload, kids, ill health, whatever it is that's stressing you out. Think about that. And what are your outlets? Remember, a bucket doesn't really flex. So what is balancing out those stresses going in? Are you doing exercise, mindfulness, me time, positive psychology, time with friends, baths, whatever works for you? What are you doing? And simplistically speaking, if you've got 4 stresses going in, you should have 4 stresses coming out. So just think about that. And if you haven't got enough positive coping strategies, create more holes in your bucket. It's a great way to be selfish and incorporate time and things that you want to do. So just a quick tool there. Have a think how that applies to you and what else you can do to manage your stress.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, I think my bucket is definitely in need of some attention. I think I've got more going in than is coming out right now. So I will definitely take time to reflect on that one. So thank you so much. That was really fascinating, really informative. I'm sure everyone would agree. I've just written down a note to myself about caffeine toxicity and the 2 to 3 cups a day. I think I've failed at the first hurdle there. So I'm going to start my detox plan pretty rapidly, I think. So yeah, really thanks for sharing all of that. So building on what Sue has said, I thought it would be interesting to find out from the people who are on the webinar today what their experiences are of workplace stress and the causes, and what, in a work context, what you feel the most often cited causes of workplace stress are. I've got a small poll which I'm going to launch right now. So I'd just like you to have a think about that. So the poll is, what do you feel are the most often cited causes of workplace stress? Just choose one that you feel is the one that mostly is the one that you would lean towards. You can see some answers coming through, percentages changing. The first one that got hit was heavy workload, but there are others coming in now. Got poor management, it's been cited, relationship with colleagues and peers, deadlines. Just going to let that run for a couple minutes more. Got a few more people to vote. Almost there. Okay, let's just pause on that then. So I'm just going to end the poll. The one that has come out at 48% of the vote is heavy workload, followed by 22% with poor management, 17% relationships with colleagues or peers, and tight deadlines at 4%. Long hours as well, 4%. So I'm just going to share those results with everybody so that you can see that should be in your chat. Okay, so let's just pop those up on the screen. If I can get the thing to respond to me. There we go. Okay, so heavy workload. Now, often we can feel fairly disempowered in the workplace to govern the amount of workload that we have. But actually, that's not strictly speaking true. And I think those who work in HR who come up against this a lot, and I know, we're sort of physician heal thyself a little bit here, because often the people who work in HR are the ones that have heavy workloads that, we don't really have anyone else to hand it on to because of the nature of the work. But supporting our colleagues in the HR department or in the wider organization is, do we have the facility for people who are feeling workplace stress or have acknowledged that there's workplace stress, what they can do about it, where they can go, who they can speak to about it. And what we talk about in addressing stress in the workplace more effectively is creating two key aspects. One is safe places and safety nets. And Sue spoke a lot about the importance of finding ways to alleviate stress when it comes, because what we do not want to see is stress escalating into anxiety and, in worst case scenario, into depression. So I guess the first thing is to be aware of those around us who may be exhibiting signs of stress. Sue spoke about, some of the signs that we might see. So perhaps you've noticed that there are people who perhaps are quieter than usual, or maybe conversely, they're louder or more prone to losing their temper than you would normally expect them to be. Perhaps they're withdrawing from social activities at work, or getting drunk when they're going out on work activities, or becoming irritable and unreasonable in the workplace, which is out of character, as we might say. Being alert to the signs and reaching out to those individuals we have concerns about should always be seen as a positive thing, which is done out of concern. Some people say, well, I don't really know how to go and talk to that individual about it because they may think I'm interfering. Well, if it's done from a warm place, if it's done out of a position of concern, it's not interfering. It's a duty of care. It's not just because it's a work environment, but it's also because it's a human thing to do, is to check that somebody's okay. And if they are saying, yeah, I'm fine, does that really mean, yeah, I'm fine? Or does it mean, you need to ask some more questions, or give them permission in a safe space to come and talk to you? So being alert to the signs and reaching out to those individuals is important, but it's also being alert to ourselves as well. What makes things stressful in our lives? We should also be alert to the signs. It makes it easier to act sooner before things get out of hand. And it's always good to be attuned to the fact that we are all different in how we cope. What may not look like much to one person to be dealing with could be absolutely overwhelming to another. One man's stress is another man's driver to be successful. So we can't compare ourselves with other people and say, well, I can cope with that, so why, they should be able to cope with it too, because that is not comparing. We're not comparing apples with apples, we're comparing apples with pears. So it's really important to create those, if we're going to create great places to work, that we need to consider how we enable the two important workplace facilities of safe spaces for where people can go if they are experiencing stress. Now that could be, as it says on the slide, could be HR. People could come to you, your own HR people could come to you as well. Occupational health is really important. If you do have an OH facility, encourage people to use it. Talking to the line manager. Some people don't feel so comfortable with that. So maybe there are other line managers or other trusted colleagues within the organization that people can feel more comfortable going and talking to. If you have an EAP, an employee assistance program, always good to signpost that to people, make sure that they know how to access it, that it's regularly promoted. Often I hear, organizations create or provide a facility of an EAP and then complain that nobody's ever using it because they don't really promote it that much. So, just keep making sure that people are aware that it's there and that they can access it, and that it is confidential. Mental health first aiders, we've seen a really big change in this over the last few years, where it wasn't even an expression that was kind of in common parlance, but now lots of organizations have mental health first aiders, And I'll talk a little bit about what Kingswood Group can provide in terms of mental health first aid training. But having a mental health first aider is not somebody who's going to, sit down as your psychologist and diagnose your every ailment in your life from childhood onwards. But they are people who are trusted advisors who can signpost and support those individuals, can advocate for them so that they can access or be signposted to access the correct support services that they may need to support them with their mental well-being. And then, of course, there are wellbeing champions who are not dissimilar to mental health first aiders, but perhaps they have a different sort of focus. Perhaps they are looking at, work activities as well that can support people with their mental and physical well-being. So being able to access breaks, as Sue was talking about, and making sure that they're drinking, enough water and having good nutritional food. So whatever is in place, in terms of a safe space, it must also have those safety nets that allow the individuals to feel that they can speak up without fear, because often it's very exposing and can make people feel very vulnerable when they have to open up about, how they're feeling in relation to their, I just jumped on a couple of slides. That's my active finger. See, my finger's getting stressed now holding over this button. So, the things that we can, just jump back, the safety nets that I was just about to talk about there. So making sure that we're operating from a place of confidentiality, making sure that we're not judgmental in the environment. So not predetermining, I know they're only complaining about this because they want some time off work. Being empathetic, that doesn't mean being sympathetic. That means being able to walk alongside the person, not to pat them on the head out of sympathy, having an openness and a willingness to listen, having some clear signposting to resources or organizations that people can use, providing that if you have one within a staff handbook, signposting people on your internet or intranet to external organizations that can help. For example, if they're stressing about financial position or, their financial or their debt management, being able to signpost them over to a debt management charity who can help them, get control over that would be a really important stress reliever. And then obviously any interventions to enable a greater understanding and awareness about stress in the workplace, which I've already briefly shown you the slide on, which is, building awareness within an organization. So workshops, seminars, training courses, well-being, running courses on things like equality, diversity and inclusion. Sometimes the stresses are caused out of how people interact with each other. Sometimes it's about having the awareness that what we think is just a bit of banter or is just, how we do stuff around here actually is causing somebody else to feel really uncomfortable and unhappy. Having training for managers to be able to have courageous conversations. It's very difficult for some people to open up a conversation for fear of the kind of reaction that they may get. If you think about grief and bereavement, often people don't want to ask questions about it because they don't want to cause upset, but actually the not talking about it causes upset as well. Courses around resilience and coping with change, really important things. Having a wellbeing forum. Lots of companies have now turned towards having this, where they have groups of people, maybe, with the wellbeing champions in the workplace or wellbeing clinics where they can have, access to specific support and testing. Mental health first aiders, EAP, OH, we've talked about. And then obviously some of the basic things from an HR point of view is making sure that your policies and procedures are really clear, accessible, and are not creators of stress. So grievance being one of the most major causes of workplace stress, people raising complaints about unhappy situations, finding an alternative to grievance, perhaps following a resolution framework or a resolution policy, inviting people to mediate and discuss and reach mutual agreement about disputes and conflict in the workplace takes the stress out of the situation. Equality and diversity, policies, having really clear instructions, guidance and training around what constitutes breaches in terms of bullying and harassment. People may inadvertently be doing things that are causing problems to others that they're not aware is actually a problem. And obviously managing change, major situation within organizations these days, people coming to us in Kingswood Group all the time about downsizing or changing and wanting to do things differently. And of course, the rollout effect, as Sue's already eloquently said, is causing stress for other people in the organisation. So, you know, there's lots of things you can do in terms of raising awareness. From a Kingswood Group perspective, there are heaps of stuff that we do ourselves. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today about some of the things that, you know, we do. But, you know, the outsourced HR project management, you know, creating training programs for line managers, providing mediation and mediated services. So if there are disputes going on in the workplace and bad feeling is arising and staff members are going off sick because they can't cope with the stress and the anxiety in the workplace, mediation can often cut through all of that and give people the support that they need to find an agreed solution that works for all of them. We provide mental health first training, mental health first aid training, and we support organisations with the development of wellbeing policies and the implementation of that across organisations. So whether that's awareness training, training for line managers, creation of policy, creation of mechanisms and systems to support people to bring issues to the forefront and have them dealt with. And obviously equality, diversity and inclusion training and guidance and policy writing. If you'd like to learn any more about those subjects or anything else that you've heard about today, you know, please do get in touch with us, and we'd be more than happy to have a free, you know, no obligation conversation with you to explore what you might need further. So on behalf of Sue and I'd like to thank you for your attendance today and your participation. At Kingswood, we pride ourselves on the range of services and solutions we can provide for clients, you know, from ad hoc HR support right the way through to providing retained HR service. I'm going to hand back to Sue to close out, but we are going to be opening up the platform for questions at the end. So please do stick around. So Sue, back to you just for the final slide. I think Sue may have already gone off to de-stress herself. Okay, so I'll just pick that one up then. So I think the key things here is notice the signs, you know, be alert to it, plan your day. If you know that you've got a heavy workload, how can you break that down? You know, could you then say, right, I'm going to dedicate some time in the morning to focusing on my emails, and I'm going to stop working on that and work on some of the written documents. When we're spinning lots and lots and lots of plates, that workload can become overwhelming. Be active. You know, as Sue said, you know, we are not designed as human beings to sit down all day doing not very much other than sitting at a desk. So make sure that you take breaks regularly, not just because it's good for your eyes if you're staring at a screen all day, but also it's good for your physicality. Your cardiovascular system needs to be stimulated. You need to get up, move around, get those muscles moving. Eating a balanced diet, you know, the often cry I hear is, I don't have time, I just grab something and go. You know, a little bit of thought the day before or the weekend before, so you can plan out a little bit better to at least have some of the food groups represented every day would be good. Balancing work and life, you know, we are all rushing to stand still at times in our lives, and being able to step off that merry-go-round and making sure that when we are on holiday, we do have that downtime, that we do ensure that we are relaxing, that we are recharging the batteries. And also from an HR perspective, that we understand and can support people with those safe places and those safety nets to really give them the opportunity, if they are feeling under pressure, to be able to talk about it without fear of negative repercussion. And before I close out and open the floor to questions, just in terms of some of the things that we offer within Kingswood Group and in partnership with the Wellbeing Clinic, we provide a range of other wellbeing interventions. We can talk about, you know, we can provide male health checks, women's health checks. We can provide support around understanding menopause and the impact of that. We offer blood tests, private blood tests, which can If those show up any indicators, that can be fed directly back into your GP practice so that they can then take the action on it. So there's a range of things that can be offered to individuals. And I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, with the NHS under pressure the way that it is, sometimes we have to find alternative ways to access the support that we might need in partnership with our GP or medical practitioners, but to ensure that we are absolutely taking control of the situations that we're in. So if you're feeling exceptionally tired, if you're feeling those signs of stress and anxiety, and it's going beyond the normal, your disinterest in life and the anxiety and the withdrawal from social things, please don't sit on that. Please reach out to somebody and talk to them and get the help that you need. So thank you so much. I'm going to now open up the floor to questions. Julie's going to hopefully lift off the mute. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. So I'm just looking down the chat. There's a comment here from Lukash. Our company's gone through a round of redundancies last year. Some members of the team are often stressed about their performance as they're worried they could be let go. How would you advise on dealing with the trauma of redundancies? Okay, so this is something that's very, very familiar. Anybody who has been through a redundancy situation in the past will understand this. And this is from two angles, I would say, Lukash. One is around what we can do from an HR perspective. So that is, first of all, acknowledging to people, being very open and clear with them that some people that are in the affected population and outside of the affected population are going to feel, some form of distress, or trauma is the word that you've used, around the anxiety of potentially going to be losing their jobs, or conversely, the survivor guilt. They're not going to be losing their jobs, but they are feeling that anxiety about what's happening to people that they know and they care about. And that's that's a first of all is acknowledging it, and calling it out and saying to people, this is how you may feel, and if you do feel that, here are some things that you can do. So you open up those safe spaces, and you ensure that those safe spaces have those safety nets in place, that if somebody does come forward and says, I think I am really struggling mentally with this whole concept, is that they are not then, treated in a different way, that they're not, or ignored. Conversely, if you have an EAP, you can signpost them over, you can provide additional support during the consultation process if that is needed, or you can signpost them to an external resource if you don't have the internal resources to do that. So Mind does have some really useful resources that you might be able to tap into. If they are experiencing unhappiness and the trauma of redundancy and the anxiety, maybe consider whether you're going to provide them with some support for how they might source other forms of employment if they are made redundant. Often organisations act on the redundancy but don't really help the individual to signpost them how they can find another job. And that may be something that will take away some of the stress. But unfortunately, redundancy really is quite a stress-inducing activity. But I think from an HR perspective, the best way forward for us is to acknowledge it before people start to feel it. Regularly tap into them throughout the course of the redundancy process, if you've got the opportunity to do that, through email, or if you've got an intranet, to say, remind people of where the safe spaces are that they can go if they are feeling under pressure from the process. giving people the opportunity to be supported to find alternative employment if they are the ones that are selected for redundancy, and making sure that those who survive the redundancy process are similarly given the support, because they may well be feeling some degree of survivor guilt, which they might need some help with. Any other questions or thoughts?
There's a new question in the chat there, Gemma. There's a couple of extra ones. So I don't know if you can read it.
Yeah, I can see. So what if stress at work from a big workload is also combined with difficult personal situations and workload? Yeah, very difficult. We know we are not singular creatures. You know, we don't just have what's going on in the workplace or what's going on outside. It's all going on at the same time. And how would I advise we deal with it as both, as I found it difficult to talk to colleagues about personal life, and sometimes it's quite sensitive. Absolutely. And again, this is where your safe spaces are really important. You know, if you don't have the ability within your organization to find a channel for release, whether that's for yourself or anybody else, and by a channel for release, that safe space, you know, if the person's not comfortable talking to somebody within the HR organization, or to a line manager, or indeed sometimes even to a mental health first aider or wellbeing champion, you know, where can you signpost them to where they can have a safe space to talk? And that may be an employee assistance program, if such exists. It could be a mental health charity. It could be a safety support line, depending on the circumstances. So if the person is in a situation around grief and bereavement, maybe that is a signposting to CRUIS, who specialise in grief and bereavement support. If they are going through challenges around finance, you know, maybe a charity like Step Change would be really helpful, because oftentimes people become overwhelmed with the pressure of dealing with their practical things in their life, like their finances, and that can have a rollout effect. So it's finding a safe space. And I always recommend in every circumstance to not bottle it up. If you are not able to talk to somebody at work, if you're not able to talk to a friend or a family member, then pick up the phone to the Samaritans or to Minds helpline, speak to somebody. Samaritans is not just for people who are experiencing severe mental health crises or feeling or who are displaying suicidal ideation. It's for anybody who feels the need to get some social support through conversation. They are an excellent service. It's completely free of charge, and it's something that, you know, everybody should have in their mobile phone and should be available on your intranet and your support lines to your employees. It's, as I said, it's not just for those people who have, you know, really suicidal thoughts. You know, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're turning things over in your head and you're anxious and you can't sleep and you're worrying, you pick up the phone and there is somebody there that you can talk to who will listen and will not judge you and will not report to anybody, and will give you that kind of moment in time just to stop and reflect, which is really important when we don't feel that we've got anywhere else to go. And that is absolutely free of charge. Yeah, 100%. Any other questions? Any thoughts? You are very welcome. I'm happy to be of help in that one. I mean, we'll be putting this presentation out onto our website, so that anybody who wants to listen again and really reflect on some of the things that have been talked about can do that in a slower time. You don't want to add to your workload thinking that you've got to get everything kind of sorted out now. You know, it is a battle in some of our working environments, whether you're in HR or anywhere else. You know, certain periods of time there'll be peaks and troughs. But if there are no peaks and troughs, if it's just constantly peak and we are constantly running at that accelerated rate, then your fight or flight mechanism is going to be running into overdrive. That is not something that your body, your mind can sustain for any length of time. So I would urge you 100% to reach out for the support that you need from wherever you can get it, you know, and that may be at work, that may be with friends or family, that may be with a neutral third party, as I've said, like Mind or the Samaritans, who I really advocate for, or if you've got other issues going on, such as around debt management, financial stability, Step Change is an excellent charity. You can go onto their website and go through their assessment free online, and they will be able to support you with getting control over your finances. I've helped a number of people with that myself personally, and I know that that's something that really, really has a big effect when that financial pressure is removed. That can allow people time to breathe and think through everything else really, really more clearly. So if there are no other questions, we are almost on time. I'd like to say once more, thank you for listening. Thank you for participating in the webinar today, the joint effort between Kingswood Group and the Wellbeing Clinic. We can support your business, say, in any aspect of HR, but also from the on the wellbeing side. And please do come onto our website, have a look through the things that we do, check out the range of services that we can offer. If you did want to talk about something not in open forum on a one-to-one basis, just get in touch with us, completely free, no obligation conversation, whether that's today, as we say, or any other time. You know, we are a good first port of call, because if we aren't able to do it ourselves, we will absolutely signpost you to someone who can support you. Thank you so much. And I will close the meeting and hope to see you on another Kingswood Group webinar in the future.